Good evening or morning or whatever time of the day it happens to be. Welcome one, welcome all to the Writers Bleck podcast. I am your host, Greg Nikas, back for another fun-filled episode with another very special guest this week. Olivie Bleck is joining us to talk about her newest novel, Girl Dinner. We'll also talk about her experience as a self-published writer, what it was like going viral on TikTok for her work, and of course, her hit series, The Atlas Six. If you guys are enjoying the Writers Bleck podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving us a review and letting us know how we're doing, what we can improve on. You can also support the show by checking us out on social media. We are at Writers Bleck Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And for that super fan out there, you can find us over on Patreon. We are a patreon.com/WritersBleckPod. We can get episodes of the podcast one day early and some extra goodies every now and then. You know, we're gearing up to some really cool stuff, but for right now, we're just kind of easing in, trying to have that be a nice, safe homepage for us. All right, housekeeping's out of the way. Let's get into the conversation with Olivie Bleck. What would you say is the best piece of fan fiction that you've ever written?
Oh my God. I'm going to be completely honest with you. My fan fiction is amazing.
Good.
um, no, so caveat, I don't engage in the source material anymore, but I used to write Harry Potter fan fiction. I've got like 4 million words of Hermione fan fiction. So if that's your thing, feel free to enjoy all 4 million words on AO3 or fanfic.net. It's all still up. I would say, I think Divination for Skeptics is my tightest one. It's 10 chapters. It's like, short and sweet by fanfic standards. And it's insane in a way that like much of my work is still insane. Like it's got a similar flavor of eccentricity. But if I were allowed to continue, I would come up with other answers.
Many of your books, they explore reoccurring themes, blending the struggles of modern life with the macabre or the supernatural, and grappling with mental health in a nuanced way. What draws you to these themes, and where did that inspiration come from?
I think I'm a fantasy person in my heart. I read an interview once with Lev Grossman that he didn't realize he was a writer until he understood that he was a fantasy writer or something like that. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but I felt a similar way that I was always very bookish. When I was a kid, I wrote a book for the local library, like summer competition, and it was a portal fantasy. It was very much in line with what I was reading, which was like the Tamora Pierce Tortal books. Like it was very much like those, let's be real. But it was also like I would say that at the time that I was a reader, we didn't have the bookish social communities that we have now where reading is like a real social activity. It's something you can do with people. I was a straight up loner, I think, just like an indoor cat reading like 15 books a week from the library. And so I would go to the sci-fi and fantasy section, which I remember being very small. Like I remember it being just like one shelf in the whole, or well, one bookcase in the whole library. And I would just read whatever was there that I hadn't read before, which means that I've read a lot of series out of order and I've read things that were not appropriate for me. And I've read some terrible books and I've read great books and, I turned out fine.
That's something I hear a lot, is that people kind of in, I guess, that millennial age demographic, oh, we felt like loners, so we buried our nose into fantasy and science fiction, but no one else liked it. What do you think?
Right.
What do you think did that? Made us all so closeted to like share what we liked, to like find our people in that regard as youngins?
I remember like it's funny. My son is 4 and he's in TK, so he's like just started elementary school. He loves recess. Like a lot of times he brings back his lunchbox is completely untouched because he wanted to go play on the playground, and that just was not me as a kid. Like I was like I want to be somewhere quiet and I'm going to read my book and like please don't bother me. I mean, I think it was a self-selecting process. It was like, we're reading because we want to be in this like imaginative inner space. And certainly there were elements of like, it's so complicated and difficult to talk about the legacy of Harry Potter now, but it certainly was a book that like everybody read. And so it was something it was easier, I think, to feel like there was community because there were the midnight release parties and the midnight premieres. And I think it was sort of the beginning of something that became this sort of voracious appetite for books as something we enjoy together. And so I think it's sort of the natural follow-up is the bookish social media. It's book talk and bookstagram, which you can just talk about the problems that these things have that are like the algorithm is a problem, right? The algorithm is biased. And so that's why you see the same books that you do. But the reality is that this is an opportunity we've never had before where things can go viral very quickly. You can share your opinions very quickly. You can find someone who enjoys what you enjoy. Any book that you've read, someone else has probably read it on some corner of social media, right? So it's this wonderful slash terrible thing of we don't have to read alone. We can though. And that's something that I do still enjoy from time to time.
So the first couple of years that you were writing and putting stuff out like professionally, you were self-published, publishing what 9 individual works within 2 years between novels and short stories. Can you tell me about being an independent author and what it was like engaging with your readers on social media to build yourself up?
I will provide the caveat that I was not trying to make a living self-publishing. I like to say this because the market today is very different from even the market when I was self-publishing, which was not really that long ago. I started self-publishing in 2016. And at the time, that was before we were having fan fiction, like with the, serial numbers stripped off and re-released. This was before self-publishing was like, self-publishing has never not been viable, I would say, but it was definitely very limited to like erotica, romance, sci-fi and fantasy sometimes, paranormal. I think there was a real understanding for the only things that could do well self-publishing were things that were designed for like voracious consumption. So they were designed for people who just like finish a book and pick up a new one. And self-publishing in general, it requires a different skill set than just writing. Like this, being a successful self-published writer is definitely possible, but it requires you to run your own business, which is not something that that's not something I was interested in. The whole time that I was self-publishing, what I really wanted to do was be traditionally published. I wanted to write my little books and be left alone. The difference, of course, being that in traditional publishing, either way, you compromise something, right? So for self-publishing, you're doing all that work yourself. Everything falls to you. You either have to understand and know how to do well, or spend the money to hire someone to get a good cover designer, a good interior designer, a proofreader, editor at whatever stage you need. So that's a lot of input on your end. That's a lot of personal investment. With traditional publishing, you don't get to make all the decisions you might want to make. The cover is out of my hands at some point, audio is out of my hands at some point. A lot of things are just not up to me, but I am willing to do that, to have someone else handle my production pipeline and my, promotional work. Where was this? Where did I start here? I don't know. Where was the beginning
Social
of this
media.
question?
Sorry.
Yeah, social media. Well, so that's the other thing that I have to specify is that I was not, I think I was present as a person on social media. I've been on Tumblr the whole time I've been writing fan fiction, and I'm still on Tumblr. If you want to talk to me, Tumblr is probably your best bet. You're not really going to find me in the Zuckerverse. I won't be happy about it. All right. You can find me on Instagram. I won't be happy about it.
I both love and hate calling it the Zuckerverse. I think that is so brilliant in the worst possible way. Oh.
Yeah, well, I feel like I think once a lot of my work is like obsessed with the dangers of technocracy, and like it's very disturbing to me that most of the ways we communicate with each other are owned by one, tyrant, basically.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today. I don't know who owns Tumblr, and that's wonderful for me. Nobody tell me. I guess, I guess what I started with, I wasn't trying to make money. I wasn't trying to reach an audience that I had never reached before. What I was trying to do was give my self-published works as cheaply as possible to people who were already reading my fan fiction. It was like, okay, I do think I deserve some money because I invented this world and this is my IP, and like this is something that is completely mine. This is why when I open with saying my fan fiction is fantastic, what I mean is I use a lot of great ideas in my fan fiction that I can never touch because it's fan fiction. It's like, man, I wasted that on something that like I could have folded into my own world. So after a certain point, I started actually doing that. That was like, oh, I want to write my own works that deal with separate themes and that do different things with characters. And there was an audience that was kind of built in there, people who had already been reading my fan fiction. I was like, I don't want this story to die on my hard drive, but at the same time, I think it's pretty good, and I think maybe you'd like it. If you liked this other thing that I wrote for free, maybe you'd also like this thing. But the Atlas 6 going viral was like, that's not something that I did. Like I'm not on TikTok. As I've made pretty clear, I don't really like being on social media. So it was this real like confluence of factors that would be very difficult to replicate. It was that the Atlas 6 came out in 2020 right before COVID. And so when Book Talk took off, it was kind of feeding an appetite that was burgeoning. Like the dark academia craving had just begun, and the Atlas 6 was available. That's one thing that's really good about self-publishing that is not true of traditional publishing, is when you write something, you can release it immediately. So lots of books that were written at the same time as, or even before, the Atlas 6 came out after it. And so they seemed like they were in the middle of or chasing a trend, even though they happened at the same time. Another thing that I had done right is that I commissioned my what do I even call her? My life partner, my partner in art, Lil Kumara. I had commissioned her for interior art. And so when TikTok took off, it was like people had ready-made content. They had the illustrations in the self-published book, and then it just kind of blew up from there in a way that I totally was not expecting or prepared for. But it has been fascinating to watch, and I'm also so grateful in a way that's almost painful, because it's just like I didn't do enough to make this happen, that a lot of times I'm just so grateful I don't even know what to do.
So the Atlas 6 was your last thing that was published independently, and subsequently the first thing that was picked up by a publisher. And the characters of the Atlas 6 are morally complex, to say the least, often making questionable decisions. How do you go about creating characters that are both flawed and captivating?
Well, that's really a taste thing, isn't it? The thing that I always tell people, because now, I've had the privilege of being on enough panels that are like how to world build and how to do fantasy. And the answer is like there's no answer to this. There is no right or wrong way. There's lots of people who think that my world building is flimsy, and from what they want or expect, they're probably right. And it's really a question of what do you like? Because I think if you don't like what you're working on, there's no possible way it'll be good. So what I always tell people is you must read broadly as a writer, if only because that's kind of your research into, certainly as a querying writer, as someone who wants to begin a writing career, you do have to understand where you fit into the market, just in the sense that you have to know who your audience is. You have to know what they like. And so you kind of have to do it backwards. Like identify which books you think have really good world building, or identify which books you think have great and complicated characters, and what about those characters is interesting. I don't need my characters to look or feel like real people. Sometimes you do. Sometimes as a tool, a literary tool, you need a character that's sympathetic. So Libby Rose in the Atlas series is a character who is designed to feel like either you or someone you know. Like she's meant to feel like a real person, so that when she goes off on her corruption arc, you feel like, ooh, how might I have been complicit in this? Or how might I have done this? I was definitely trying to create a feeling of like, how might this have happened to me, as opposed to, I think when I approach morality as a very gray and fluid thing, I think we live in times that are very like virtuous or not virtuous. Like that's all that's left to us in terms of consumption. That's all we have. Like our options are consume virtuously or not, right? And that's the only thing that's left on our plate. And so I think that can be really limiting. I think there's lots of people who think of themselves as good people because they're checking the boxes on what a good person is. So I wanted to take someone like Libby, where her grasp of morality what was problematic about it was that it was very rigid. She was not really able to allow her context to change her mind. She could not adapt to things because she kind of like, once she had inputted the belief, I'm a good person, I'm a logical person, she could not change it. She could not see herself becoming corrupted over time. And then there's characters that are like, this character's purpose in the narrative is to make the reader laugh. And that's like the relationship between Callum Nova and Raina Mori, for example. That's just like these are two characters who are meant to give an additional texture to the narrative that like even a ridiculous person can sometimes by accident do the right thing. Like Callum is a great example of the meme that's like the worst person you know just made a great point. So I think if we look at fiction as an exercise in empathy, then I think all of my books are they're all me having a conversation with you, a slightly different conversation with the reader each time. And sometimes that conversation is about like, what about this situation is complex and what about it is simple? Ultimately, I think I'm always writing with an existentialist viewpoint. All of my books are ultimately wrestling with the question of how to live, how to live, just like how to live well, how to live a good life, even if our context is calling for something else, even if the context is calling for compromise at all times. And so pretty much every book is like, what are you willing to compromise for power, for acceptance, for safety? And those are all reasonable things to want, but also what are you willing to do and how far does that go?
Yeah, and one of the key elements that you touch on in the Atlas Six is choosing your own path. How important is choice versus fate in the context of the story?
I think that one thing that I definitely did not want to do with the Atlas series was like undermine anyone's belief in a plan or in a blueprint. But even if you are a person existing with the fundamental belief that there is a plan or that like your life is being determined by forces larger than you are still making choices. As you live your life, you're making choices that reflect on that belief system. And so the question or the purpose of the story is not to change your belief so much, but to ask you what choices are you making. The joke I always like to make is that the Atlas series has the same moral as Frozen 2, which is that it's just about making the next right choice, or like all you can do is make the next right choice. And like that is the closest approximation to goodness that we can really put faith in, and especially when things are challenging. The Atlas series is also very similar to The Good Place in terms of looking at the philosophy of morality and stuff. But if you just look at your life as an individual who is inextricably connected to other people, then what really matters is your relationship to others and the choices that you make.
The ending of the Atlas Six seems a little open to interpretation. I think that goes hand in hand with that feeling of, it's what you make of it. How do you decide how much to leave with the reader for their imagination, like what to leave with the reader's imagination versus explaining and clarifying like every little detail?
I write for a curious reader for sure. I like to joke that I write for the thinky reader. I write for the person who's like constantly having little thought experiments. I'm not a person who likes epilogues. I'm not a person who likes to be told what happens next, because what if I don't agree? What if I don't like the author's view of what a happy ending is, or what if I think that I think that I have a great respect for my readers, both to the extent that I want them to be aware of what they're getting into, and that I want them to be able to take away whatever they want to take away. I mean, I even think of my books as having like a popcorn quality. Like I think that a pulpy quality is important. Like it's you have to enjoy the story. I want you to enjoy. There's tons of little jokes in in on the Atlas series, because I think there is a version of the reader experience that's just like, that was a good story. Then there's also the version that's like, this book has posed these questions to me, and it has suggested that maybe, this is something I hadn't thought about before. This is something I hadn't put words to before. Again, what does it mean to live well? What does that mean to me? What choices am I making? Is power ever not exploitation? So that's kind of the like secondary read if you choose to. And it's the same thing with Girl Dinner as well. That's just like, it's this question of what are you willing to do? How much of yourself are you willing to compromise for power?
For the Girl Dinner, why did you choose? I think I know the answer, but for the uninitiated, why did you choose the title Girl Dinner?
So Girl Dinner, as you may recognize, is a meme. And it had trickled down to me, like, as again, I'm not on TikTok, so by the time it reached me, it was just truly everywhere. I just thought it was so girl dinner is supposed to reference like a low effort meal that you throw together, that you like things you nibble on in the pantry as you stand there thinking about what to have for real dinner and then you're full. I initially came up with this concept just as a punchline. It was like, hey, what if I wrote a book about a cannibal sorority and called it Girl Dinner? People laughed at that. TJ Klune laughed at that. He was there and everyone was like, write it. And then I made the same joke to my editor and she was like, no, seriously, write it. And I realized that I was making this as a joke, but I am actually very interested in the intersection between femininity culture and violence, or rather the question of at what point do we become violent, and what does feminine violence look like? What does feminine power even mean? Like, I had watched the Barbie movie and I'd read a bunch of books like Fleischman is in Trouble, which is a great book. I love Taffy Burdesser-Akner, and The Best of Everything by Rona Jaff. And there's all these books that just all the media we consume, I think at this point, post Girl Boss, has come to the conclusion it is not possible for women to have it all. Doesn't matter how hard we lean in, right? Like it's not going to work. I mean, that's just depressing. Like, what does that leave us with then? The little treat economy is all we have left. Like, and so I kind of wanted to, I knew it was going to be a satire because I knew I was going to lean into that dissonance of like, what is ridiculous about this? What are we doing? What are we doing really? But I also, I wanted it to be funny. I definitely, like, I knew even before I started writing that someone was going to say, how can I be expected to girl boss under these conditions? And I also wanted to, the first chapter is like, it's Sloane, who's the older adjunct professor character. She's got an 18-month-old daughter. Her daughter is very picky. The doctor has indicated that like the daughter is a little small on the growth chart, or maybe isn't consuming enough iron. And Sloane's just really under the very normal domestic pressure to provide for her child. And she can't do it though. Her daughter won't eat. So the first chapter is this like domestic nightmare of just dinner. And the worst part of dinner being that it's going to happen again tomorrow and every day after. And I wanted it to feel like the pilot episode of The Bear, where it's just like so much is going on. So much is going through Sloane's head, most of which she's not saying aloud. Just this feeling like, I know something's going to go wrong. Like, I know this is building to something, and like, I don't know how to correct it. Like, there's this impossibility of course correction and all this little minutia, just noise, just like, that's how I wanted it to feel. It's a little bit claustrophobic.
So the book centers around these two women that are at very different stages of their lives. Can you tell us a little bit about how those two, their relationship works? And do you see maybe different versions of yourself in these two characters?
Yeah. So when I decided to write Girl Dinner, and I knew I was going to write about, this group of women who have already decided to become violent. I do also like to say this book is not about the act of eating. This is not a gory book. It's about the decision of eating. I had to decide, who am I primarily talking to? Am I talking to the majority of my audience, which I think demographically we're talking Gen Z, young women, or am I talking to women who are in my same stage of life, which is obviously mostly relevant to me? I'm 36. I am a tired girl boss. I was definitely told that I would achieve everything if I just did all the things, on the like achievement checklist, then I'd be fine. And that has not turned out to be the case, which is true of like the entire millennial generation. But, then I realized I could talk to both people, and I could have that conversation two different ways. And so Sloane is a real person is similar to the way Libby is a real person. Like, Sloane is having real thoughts. Like, I think most mothers who've will read Sloane and recognize themselves there and recognize these things as feeling familiar. But also similar to Libby, I did want that to highlight the blind spots in Sloane's perspective. That's like, okay, well, here's all the things that she's thinking about. And if she only focuses on those things, what can she be made to do? Whereas Nina is kind of this personification of all the desires of girlhood. She's the personification of how potential is just an empty space, right? Like, potential is just everything you could be if you just worked hard enough. But at the same time, Nina is a little bit more disillusioned than, Sloane of the girl bosses. Nina is Gen Z, so she's grown up with social media. She already understands the way that she is surveilled and the way that, like, even Nina's thoughts are very equivocating. Like the way that she thinks is very online, that she can make all these arguments, but she doesn't actually believe anything yet. So there was this kind of sense of Nina being formless and but in a being formless, but in a sympathetic way. That's just like, I remember being 19 and wanting to be all these things and just wanting so desperately and being ambitious and this just hunger, this just desire to devour things. And instead of being told not to, being told that it's okay. I think that's where the distinction is for Nina. That's just like, what makes this generation different? What if we make it so that they have already accepted, as I think they have, that there is not really a way out of this? I think that's how we wound up with the Troud Wives and the I'm just a girl and this feeling that, like, maybe it's not possible to achieve all these things, and so what do we do instead? And I thought that was a very interesting question for both women.
I have so many more questions, but it looks like we're about out of time. So I guess I'll just leave it on this really important question. What has been your greatest achievement as a boxer?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. No, yeah, there was one time that I slipped a really good a really good jab. I always get caught by jabs. My arms are short. So a lot of times if someone throws a jab right at my forehead, like it's gonna hit me. So yeah, one time I slipped a jab and returned with a hook, and it was like such an achievement.
Good.
That probably felt better than getting on the New York Times list, honestly.
Where can people go to find more from you, more from your books, more about your upcoming stuff?
Okay, well, definitely my website, oliviebleck.com. You can go anywhere you want to. You can go anywhere you want to from there into the Zuckerverse. But you can also sign up for my newsletter. I send one newsletter once a month. It's got what I'm reading and listening to and an essay about my feelings. You can also find, again, Tumblr, AO3, and you can find me on YouTube. My channel is Olivie Bleck is Not Writing, and yeah, sometimes I answer questions there.
All right, fantastic. Olivie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next time on the Writer's Bleck podcast, children's author and lifestyle entrepreneur Sandra Magsalmon is joining us to talk all about her latest release, Silly Witch, her mission to spread love with everything that she does, and weirdly enough, the invention of the Ouija board, just in time for a special Halloween episode of the podcast.
From 0 to 3, the brain will never, ever develop as quickly and as deeply as it will from the first 3 years of a child's life. So the more that kid is engaged and involved in making connections physically, emotionally, socially, it's so important. And books are the perfect tool to do that.
If you're enjoying the Writer's Bleck podcast and want to help us keep the lights on, please consider heading over to patreon.com/writersbleckpod and contributing to the show. That's how you'll get the video version of this podcast, get the podcast 1 day early when it comes back for season 2.5, and stay up to date with everything that's happening with Writer's Bleck. Help us keep the lights on, help us keep the engines going for as little as $1 whole. Come on, you can't beat that. That's like... That is less than a cup of coffee. That's less than a gas station cup of coffee. In this economy, you could we're where you want to be. I gotta work on that pitch, that presentation. Until next time, I've been Greg. You've been awesome, and keep writing.